we are now recording, and I'll be posting this on our YouTube channel, and we'll be asking Sam Humphreys, who's our citizen science coordinator down here, to put all the YouTube videos onto our website as well. So we'll have a page dedicated to the Citizen Science Forum, so we'll be able to have a go-to place there for all this information. Hopefully it'll be a good source of information for the project in general. Okay, just before we go any further with the talk, just thought I'd give a big up to our funders, the National Lottery Heritage Fund. This project's been a huge boost to the Rockwell project in general, and it's enabled us to do this kind of thing, so thank you very much. So I mentioned sewage being a topical issue at the moment, has been for over a year or so now, particularly topical for over a year or so now. This is a picture of that was, I would say, it was going viral last autumn, of what was purported to be a sewage spill in the St Agnes area, St Agnes Bay. There was
sorry to interrupt, Ben, but you're not sharing your screen at the moment.
I'm glad you told me that. No, sorry. Good on you. So many of you might remember this. There's a video actually that was posted of this horrible brown sludge that was in the sea at St Agnes, and people all around the country are becoming more and more concerned about sewage spills. There are a lot of sewage spills happening on the coastline and into rivers. The cause of these sewage spills, their raw sewage, is well, they're supposed to occur under extreme rainfall conditions, when the sewage system and the water system gets overloaded and has to the sewage then has to be emptied into the rainwater system, and raw sewage gets spilled onto our beaches. Here's a tweet from Surfers Against Sewage, who provide the best, most up-to-date information on where and when this is happening. They have an app called our Safer Seas service, and that can give you alerts in your location for when one of these spills is happening. And you can see from this image here, I don't know if they've got a date for when this actually was, this image was from, but you can see there are a lot more crosses and ticks around the coastline of the UK, and that represents ongoing spills. And according to Surfers Against Sewage, in 2021 alone, there were over a third of 1 million sewage spills into rivers and seas across the UK. So it is a very worrying and well, disgusting situation. And bringing it up to date, we were provided with this image from Maenporth yesterday, which is right in our neck of the woods, just south of Falmouth. And you can see that there's a similar looking brown stain on the sea occurring at Maenporth. The complication here is that we know from the data that's provided by the Rivers Trust, they also have a sewage map, which has more detail, it has more locations, complete coverage of where sewage outlets occur, that there aren't any sewage overflows at Maenporth. So this was actually more likely to be runoff than sewage, which is probably reassuring from a human health point of view, but it's not necessarily much better for the wildlife, and it's definitely a cause for concern in itself. And that's that's an illustration of there's a much wider variety of threats to our marine wildlife and to water pollution than just sewage. But we don't really know about this situation. As I say, the one in St Agnes, there's a lot of dispute about whether it was runoff or human sewage. Many people insistent it was one or the other. And this is an issue for us and our project as well, of actually getting the raw data, the information about what's going on before we even worry about how it's affecting the wildlife. So that's the situation generally. For the Rockpool project, I mentioned the Blue Recovery project, which is funded by National Lottery Heritage Fund. And this is a project which works with the communities in our two hubs, which in Plymouth and Falmouth. And we've been going for about, I think about 15, 16 months now, 24-month project. And the structure of the project is based around monthly beach days. We have other events other than that, but the main events every month is a community event where we go rock pooling and we inspire people about rock pool wildlife that's on their doorstep, because it is incredible, and get people involved in their local natural environment. But we also teach them and train them to become citizen scientists. So we divide our groups into family groups and citizen science groups, which are for older children and adults. So we can tailor that those activities accordingly. As I say, we've been doing that for a little while now, and we have built up some fantastic communities that are very knowledgeable about the wildlife in these locations. My interest personally is from a citizen science. I'm from a citizen science background. I'm a marine biologist, and I've studied a lot of different things, actually with terrestrial wildlife as well, with big data sets that have often been collected by citizen scientists, members of the public, and that's got me a lot, well, very much involved in the ground, working with the public to collect data that we can use for ecological research and conservation. And I've been working within this project to develop our citizen science and work with our communities to do that. And this presentation that I'm talking about today is how we've done that within the Blue Recovery project. Everything that we do with the Rockpool project generally, it does involve citizen science. We try to make it a little bit more involved, I suppose, or inspiring for people taking part, than just asking them to go and collect data that we then use. We like to inspire people, get them involved in what we do, and then within the activities that we do, collect data, and we use waterproof devices, cameras, basically, to collect data, and then we analyze the data and feed it back to people, and complete this circle of citizen science. So hopefully sort of inspiring people further and getting them further involved. All of the data that we collect, and this is something that we've developed a lot as part of the Blue Recovery project, is shared freely, both nationally and internationally. We've worked with Dash at the Marine Biological Association in Plymouth, who are the central repository for data on marine species and habitats in the UK, to develop our data pipeline so it goes to the right places. And now, thanks to that work, when people submit data to the Rockpool project, it goes through the iRecord system, which is the best system for submitting wildlife data, and that means that it's once it's gone through that iRecord system, it feeds into the natural pipeline, which allows it to be shared nationally with our national biodiversity network. But it also goes through an external verification step on that way as well. So we have images for most of our data, and so an external verifier can have a look at that and confirm whether the identification is correct or not. And there's a whole host of different other data repositories at a European and global scale that will go through to. So it's been brilliant to develop that as part of the Blue Recovery project. And all the data that we collected for the Sewage project will be shared in this way as well. Now, how do we end up studying sewage as part of this project? Well, we basically consulted with our communities and worked with the communities to decide what they would be most interested in studying. So we had a co-development process, and we met up both in person and through online meetings like this, to find out what people were interested in, what they cared about, and think carefully about would we be able to do that as part of a citizen science project. The first thing we did is just ask people what they cared about all sorts of different things, had all sorts of different ideas of things that we could do. And then we had an online poll, which we opened up for a couple of weeks, so the public could just choose what they thought was interesting out of those various different topics that people came up with. And this is how it looked. We had our top three items of topics of interest were sewage impact, climate change and ocean acidification, and positive human impacts. And we, three of our fantastic team members, two of whom are here this evening, were good enough to take one of these topics and present them at a final meeting to decide which of them we should do. And we did it that way because we didn't just want to take the top one. We wanted to think about how viable it was, and then discuss that as a team before we made a final decision, which we did. And then we had a final decision, and everybody voted, and we had a clear victory for the impact of sewage pollution. And I think that's probably partly a reflection on how doable that project was within the time frame that we were working on, but also on the interest, the public interest in it that I described at the start of the session. So that's what we're looking at now. We've been doing that since the turn of the year, and looking at the impact of sewage on wildlife. I think it's quite important to emphasise that there's no doubt that a lot of the interest has come from a human perspective. People just obviously don't like the idea of us swimming in raw sewage. But we're the Rockpool Project, and we're all about Rockpool wildlife. So we're looking to see if there is any evidence that it's having a negative impact on the wildlife itself. So we've been working on our Blue Recovery beach days, different survey techniques, and looking at testing the water samples. And now we have an outline plan for how we're going to survey this going forward. And in each hub, we have two people that are going to be taking the lead in it. So in Falmouth, we have Samuel. So he'll be in touch over the coming months, outside of Blue Recovery Beach Days, organising survey programmes. In Falmouth, we have been going. We started the Rock Project in Falmouth. It's our longest, so it's our oldest hub, and we've got a lot of different survey sites already in Falmouth. They're highlighted here in yellow. We meet every month at the Falmouth Princess Pavilion, and so that's where our beach days are held. And we wanted our sewage project to fit in with, and so we can work on it on our beach days, which fits fine because it's basically in the middle of where we've got a lot of survey sites. The situation as far as sewage in Falmouth is that we have, well, there are. I think at least a couple, well, maybe three different sewage outlets, but the most relevant one for us is this one here, the Queen Mary pumping station. And this was, well, it's the same as a lot of the storm overflows. It is spilling quite regularly, 39 spills in 2022, according to the Rivers Trust data. And as you might see, we do have another one. I'm just going to put it up here. On the other side of Pendennis Point here, which also spilled quite an equal amount of times last year. They're the main ones. For our survey strategy, we are kind of disregarding this one over to the east on the other side of Pendennis Point, and focusing on the distance from this one. The reason being is, and we don't know this for sure, but with thinking that it's unlikely that sewage that's coming out of this is going to be washing up back here. It might be, and that's something we need to try and ascertain. But we're focusing more on the distance from the Queen Mary pumping station, and we've got a number of survey sites here, from Gilling Bays across to here, which we call Tunnel Beach and Castle Beach, where we can survey the sites and see how the wildlife changes. So I'm missing a slide here. That's a bit annoying. The situation in Plymouth, in fact, I don't know if I'm missing a slide. I might have to let's have a quick look. Yeah, I'll come back to the Plymouth one here. Yeah, we have a once we've collected the data in Falmouth, we want to get a comparison site, a site which is not impacted by sewage overflows, and we've identified that ideally we want a site that's fairly close by, but has quite similar natural conditions to what we find in Falmouth. And so we identified the point near Kenneck Sands on the Lizard. And we do already have some survey sites here, and hopefully, well, there's no problem at all to establish new survey sites, and we'll look to head in September, do a big trip over there and survey these sites in the same way as we're doing in Falmouth, to provide a good comparison as we go from west to east or east to west. And see how the gradient here compares to the gradient that we're finding in Falmouth. So I'll go over the shop now and go back to Plymouth. In Plymouth, we've got Zach Russell, who is leading the citizen science program up there, and he's looking to organise the first survey days there very soon. It's quite a complicated situation in Plymouth. It's a city that's considerably bigger than anything we have down here in Falmouth. We do have a number of survey sites there at the moment. The home sites for the Plymouth crew is at Firestone, around Devil's Point area. I think that's where you guys were this weekend just gone. Is that right, sir? Okay. Yeah. So ideally, we want to do a similar thing in Plymouth. We can definitely put in more sites in Plymouth. So we've got a sewage overflow in the sort of eastern part of that area, so which is also spilling fairly regularly according to the Rivers Trust. One thing which is a little bit unhelpful at the moment, as far as this particular sewage overflow is concerned, is unlike the one in Falmouth, getting Vase, the Queen Mary one, it's not on the Surface Against Sewage app, so we don't get up-to-date information of when it's spilling at the moment. But we're chatting to Surface Against Sewage about that, so who knows that if they can help us with that, then that might change. There is also another nearby storm overflow, which is a little bit further up the Tamar, which spilled even more last year. So, but both of them, well, I suppose there's a similar situation in terms of a location, and there are none which are coming more to the south. If you look over the Tamar and into Cornwall and the Mount Edgecombe area, and so it's probably a valid comparison to do some surveys going on here, see how the wildlife change is moving away from these sewage outfalls. The complication here is that we can sort of guarantee that the salinity is going to vary along with the sewage, any sewage that's coming out of this region, because obviously you've got the Tamar River coming down there. But this is just the way it is. We had a look, we can put some more sites in, and we will put some more sites in to get that gradient coming across there. And sorry about that. There we go. So in terms of getting a comparison, we had a good chat about this with Zach earlier on today, and we just don't really have one, to be honest. It's quite a unique area, Plymouth, because not only have you've got a lot of sewage coming through. I've added on all the other sewage outlets in Plymouth there, and they all spilled last year many times. But the other thing that is complicating it is the breakwater, and that makes the whole of Plymouth Sound a lot calmer than it would be otherwise, which is great for the city and all the maritime activity there. But it does mean that there isn't really anywhere that compares to it. And so I think the best thing we can do is to survey around the area, with all of this, we're hoping to get some data on the water pollution as well, and it'll just be a very correlative study that we'll have to just try and pick the bones out of afterwards. And just a little bit more on the survey plan and the rationale behind it. This is a map that I made for Falmouth, and this is again, we've got the sewage outlets here in orange and our survey sites. The green colour just represents the distance away from a sewage location. And if we just look at this one here, and the green colours, so it's the sites which are nearby are expecting to be heavily impacted by sewage, and the ones moving away from it less so. The advantage of doing multiple sites along a gradient like that, rather than just doing two sites, one high impact and one not, might be shown using this graphic. So this is based on a study that was undertaken in Australia, looking at sewage impacts, and they looked at it, this isn't real data, but they looked at it across multiple geographical scales. And they showed that limpets were impacted by sewage, and what they showed is that there is a positive impact between the amount of limpets that you'll find and the amount of sewage going out. They had a different system. Whereas we're talking about intermittent spills of raw sewage, their pipes were more continuously pumping out treated sewage. But yeah, so that had a positive impact on the limpet abundance, probably caused by the nutrients fertilizing the water and causing certain seaweeds to grow more, and which the limpets feed from. But what they found was, even though it had a positive impact, it didn't have a positive impact in the way that we showed in the previous graph. It was positive once you got to a certain distance away from the sewage pipe, but once you got to the closest, the most impacted sites, there were fewer limpets. And the possibility here is that when the limpets are too close to the sewage outlets, the benefit of additional seaweeds is lessened. Perhaps they're being affected by other pollutants in the sewage. Or perhaps maybe the seaweeds themselves are being affected by other things when they're closer to the pipe. And obviously, if these guys had just surveyed the heavily impacted and the least impacted sites, they wouldn't have shown any sort of impact at all on this limpet community. So that's it in terms of where we're going to survey. I don't know if anybody from our team or outside has got any questions on that at all. Let's see if we've got something in the chat. No, okay. Feel free to stick questions in the chat as we go, and we can pick them up. In terms of how we're going to survey the wildlife, there's different ways of doing it. As I said, I've worked with citizen science data for many years, and also in the field with citizen scientists for many years. And it's to get to the nuts and bolts of it, it's a balancing act. So at the moment, every time at all of our beach days, we always do a community bio-blitz. We usually split into quite large teams to do that. They're the most popular surveys. They're the most fun. They're basically what people like to do when they go rock crawling, is just go out there and see what they can find. There's no time limits, no limits on the sizes of the groups taking part. And anything that's found can be included. So we do record the data, so people take pictures of everything they find, and then we upload it, and it goes through and it's shared widely by the system that I showed earlier. They're very popular, which in one way is good, because it means that people are going to be more likely to do them. The downside is all of this lack of standardization means that there's no way that we'd be able to pick up any signals of something like sewage impacts using them, because sometimes it could be just 2 or 3 people, sometimes it could be 10, 20. Sometimes you've got people who are experts in certain things. Sometimes you've got novices. It's designed to be free and easy, so lots of people can get involved, not necessarily to provide data that we can use. So we can't use these bioblitzes to study the impact of sewage. We have to use other things. One thing that we are using are biodiversity surveys, and the difference of the biodiversity surveys is that we do control some of the things that I mentioned before. So we have fixed time limits. There are different types. So there are sort of entry-level ones, which are 20 minutes, and more involved ones, which are longer. All of our time searches at the moment are for 2 people only. And so that keeps that consistent, and they're for specific species groups. For the simpler surveys, we have surveys for different groups of crustaceans and anemones. And this means that if you're doing one of these surveys, you have to focus on these groups, and you have to record not only the species that you found in that group, but the species that you didn't find in that group. And that makes a big difference in terms of the usability of the data. And we call this biodiversity data, which basically means that for a specific group, a specific taxonomic group, we have presence absence data for every single species in that group. And that can tell us, first of all, if the diversity in terms of the numbers of species is changing due to, in our case, a sewage impact, or if it's associated with sewage impact. But it can also, and much more importantly, probably, tell us if the actual species themselves, what the species are changing. So we might find that there's no change in the number. There's 10 species in high impacted site, 10 species at low impacted site, but that doesn't mean those 10 species are exactly the same species in each location. And there are ways that we can analyze the data to see if we're getting a change in the community composition associated with sewage impact. Just to mention our recent discussions on this method, one big downside to it is that the protocol says we have a survey area, so you have to stay within the survey area. But in practice, when we do them, we do not stop at this lower shore red line that's shown on the map here. The actual protocol says to carry on and go down to wherever low tide is and to conduct the survey at low tide. That's a problem. Well, I guess I feel like I should get some interaction going on. Why might that be a problem? I'm going to pick on you, Alex, because I can see you're listening avidly, and see if you can answer that question. Why is it a problem that we survey all the way down to low shore?
Just because then data that will be collected outside of the line, I don't really know how to describe it, but I know it's a problem just because it wouldn't. Yeah, because whatever's out. Do you want to explain it?
I was just going to say, because it's not standardized between different surveyors, they might go into certain areas that other surveyors don't. But
yeah.
No, not quite. I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but that's not really the key issue here.
Yeah.
The key issue is that even though we always do the survey at low tide, the actual height of low tide varies massively. So it varies every week as the tides move between spring tides and low tides, spring tides and neap tides rather. Sorry. We tend to do our blue recovery beach days on spring tides because they're the best tides, but they vary a lot across the year as well. So I think down here in Falmouth on the last beach day, we had a low tide height of 1 metre above chart datum. I think on our beach days, they probably vary from up. They probably go as high as 1.4 metres and low and as low as 0.0 on a really good tide. And so the actual area being surveyed does vary, and varies in an important way, because a lot of the species which are in that extra bit, which is only revealed sometimes, the majority of them you won't find higher up the shore. So that's going to have a dominant impact on the methodology. So what we're looking to trial with this is basically exactly the same thing, except for you do stop at a particular shore height. In fact, we could just use thinking about it, the easiest way to do it is just to use the lines here. They're probably, I think these lines, both the high shore and the low shore, they've been taken from the Ordnance Survey, and they represent the average, for low tides and high tides across the UK. So the downside of that is that we won't find anything that you typically find lower than that. But the good side of it is that as long as we only do surveys where the tide is at least lower than that, we are covering the same consistent area. So it's a change to our normal protocol, but I think it might be necessary to make the data more consistent and usable. We've always had the idea of trying to deal with this analytically, but we've never succeeded in that. So I think it might be necessary. Anyway, that's the time searches. And then this weekend, we just worked on the Quadrat surveys. We down in Falmouth, we tried these out, I think, in the first time in January, but we've in both hubs we tried them at the beach day just the weekend just gone, and I think it was a big success. A quadrat, for if you're not familiar with a quadrat, it's basically a square, and our particular quadrats are squares that are divided into 100 little squares, and they provide a fixed area to survey. So it means that you survey exactly the same amount of area, shape of area every single time, and having these divisions within them basically aid counting the species that you're looking for within them. And this is the most targeted approach. So we have information from previous studies of particular groups of species that are likely to be impacted. And the protocol that we have is, and we tried out, and I think worked quite well at the weekend, is kind of a two-level protocol. So there's an entry-level protocol where we ask people to count just simply how many squares have been filled with seaweeds, how many have a sea snail, and that includes limpets, how many have at least one barnacle, and then the full method asks exactly the same thing, but we we ask people to break it down into more specific groups. So there's three main groups of seaweeds: reds, greens, and browns, and so that's how they're broken down. We look for specific groups of sea snails and also for specific species of barnacle, which is probably the most challenging aspect of it. So we've got some good data on that, and we collected it across a transect for the midshore and for the low shore for both Falmouth and Plymouth. We've got quite a lot of quadrats finished, so we should be able to get good information for how powerful these quadrats are at picking up. We should expect some difference between midshore and low shore, and we'll be able to find out how many quadrats are needed for that, and that will help us design our quadrat survey strategy in the future. I think on the next beach day, the first survey event that Zach's doing in Plymouth and probably down here as well, we're going to get people to do more of the full survey technique, breaking these groups down a little bit more. We didn't really focus too much on that this beach day. We just looked to get as many quadrats done as possible on the simpler method. And the big benefit for this approach is that we get some good abundance data. We have started collecting abundance data for our time searches as well, but it has to be quite rough, and people assign species categories that are quite broad. So if it was, say, if they're just one or a few, many, that kind of thing. Whereas this gives a much more precise calculations, much more precise counts for the species that we're interested in. So those are the methods, and we're looking to get all of our sites surveyed for that by September, so we can then do our comparison sites then and get everything finished by then. The other thing that we are very keen on doing is actually testing the water, because what we don't know is if the water pollution actually looks anything like this. We know it's very intermittent, so it's likely to change over time. Does the longer term impact look like this or not? We don't know. And we've been collecting samples in order to try and get to the bottom of that. And we have been using so far, we've got a couple of these handheld testers, which are probably the most suitable thing for citizen scientists that we can have. We'd like to get a lot more of them. Because even though they're fairly quick to use, only one person can use them at a time. They're still not quick, and it'd be nice to get quite a few of them. We got some data. This is data that we collected, I think, back in February, which was a long time away from any of the sewage spills that we had. And it showed that we were all of it's testing for phosphate. So we got some data using them for phosphate, quite messy data in terms of there didn't seem to be any pattern going away from the sewage outlet here associated with it. Perhaps not surprising, it was the water was collected over a month after the last spill. And the actual levels are very, very low indeed. So even though on the map here, you can see you've got some rock pools that had quite relatively high levels of phosphate in. If you actually scale this, rescale exactly the same data, but put it on the scale of the readings, that how high they can go onto these things, and go up to 2.5, you can see that they're actually very, very low levels of phosphate in the water. The marine water is very low in nutrients anyway, and that's why we've selected these particular readers, because some of the tests that are used by people like the Rivers Trust, who do citizen science on this kind of thing in the rivers, they are not as sensitive as these, and they can get away with being less sensitive because the phosphate levels are higher in the freshwater rivers. But yeah, so there was nothing there. So yeah, we're keen to get more, but before we get more, we're also keen to find out whether phosphate is the right thing to test. And we don't really have the capacity to test all these samples for a wide range of different things. And so we've been working with a few other people, in particular, now we've developed our relationships with the University of Plymouth and Professor Catherine Willis, and Dr. Simon Usher, who runs one of the water testing laboratories in Plymouth University. And they've received funding for their project, Digital Parks in the Sea, which is very, very compatible with what we're doing, and looking to develop citizen science toolkits that projects such as us can use to test for water quality. And so since February, we've collected a lot of samples, including when we've had spills, and probably the most extreme sample that we've collected, I collected myself a couple of weeks ago when I got an alert from one of our team members that there was an ongoing spill the evening before I was due to deliver all the samples up to Plymouth. And I went out down to Gilly Beach with my paddleboard and collected the sample. It was quite calamitous because I took my paddleboard because I didn't want to get in the water with all this stuff going on. But these things tend to happen when the weather's not great, and I was chucked around all over the shop and ended up in the water anyway. I had to just ditch the paddleboard back at the top and just get in and get it. And then go home and have a shower as quick as I could. So it's pretty disgusting, but I got the samples. So the Plymouth lab have got them now, and they're going to be testing them for a wide range of different things. And we'll see if phosphate is the best thing to test for. And hopefully, whatever, well, we'll just make a decision based on the data that they produce. They're testing the water now. On the best equipment that we can get for the budget. We don't have a huge budget, but that hopefully we can come up with some stuff that we can regularly test the water over the year ahead. So going forward, how we're going to be working on this project over the summer. So we have got some data already that we've collected on the beach days, and so I'll be presenting that at future citizen science forums. The format for these citizen science forums I mentioned, we're going to have external speakers, but they're going to be giving talks which are going to be shorter talks, sort of 15 to 20 minutes with 10 minutes for questions. And then we'll have an update every month on the latest results from the water pollution project. We're going to be having survey events, which are specifically for this project. And of course, we're going to be tying it into beach days as we have done before. If you're not already, do sign up to the Rockwool Project Eventbrite and follow it because then you'll get alerts every time an event goes on there. So we have 2 speakers lined up for the next Citizen Science Forum. So as soon as Samuel's put them onto Eventbrite, if you're following it, then you'll be the first to know. And of course, we also put on there about our beach days, and we'll be putting our survey events on there as well. So that's the best way to keep on top of what's going on with the project. The upcoming events that we've got booked in, we do actually have a couple of other people who are hopefully going to be talking to us in August and September, but we have booked in confirmed now Jess Morris who's the local regional representative for Surfers Against Sewage, is going to be speaking to us in July. I mean, it's brilliant to be able to chat to these guys because they've been campaigning and doing great work on this issue for, well, I don't actually know, but it must be, well, it must be decades, isn't it? So it'd be brilliant to hear what the latest is with them. They're very active on this issue now, and as I mentioned, they have the app, which is a great, it's the best and only really sort of up-to-date source of information for us on that on this issue. And then next month, we have Dr. Don Bothwell from Durham University. So Christoph, our science coordinator, knows John, and he's kindly agreed to give us a talk on an ongoing situation up in the northeast, in the Tees, which sounds absolutely horrific. It wasn't on my radar until Christoph told me about it. With a mass die-off of not just crabs but crustaceans on the northeast coast, and a huge ongoing argument over what's actually producing it. So what's actually caused it. So no, this isn't related to sewage, but is related to marine water pollution. John has been at the forefront of looking into what might have caused these deaths of crustaceans. So it'll be very interesting to hear from him next month, and I'm sure he might have some useful insights for us on our project as well. And that's it. Any questions at all from anyone in the audience?
There's a question about the mechanic sands in the chat.
Yes, okay. Just give me a second on that. That's from Debbie. Hi, Debbie. With control sites in Kenneck Sands, there's a tourist caravan park nearby. Would you know if there may be potential discharge events from that site that may influence and impact your site? Well, I think I might have even stayed in that campsite, so I do know a little bit about it, but I don't know how it works with any sewage produced by them. I reckon, well, I don't know what your thoughts are, Debbie, but I reckon there's a good chance they have maybe, I don't know, maybe a big septic tank or something like that. They're probably not connected to the normal sewage system. We can find out. I'm sure they'll let us know. Yeah, it would be interesting to know. And there is a lot of that kind of stuff going on. I think sometimes people know about it and sometimes they don't. Yeah, it'd be good to find out. And I suppose, hopefully, by the time we do the surveys there in September, we'll have the water testing situation developed a bit, so we can collect some samples and see what the water's actually doing.
Sometimes there's an issue with sort of yachts and things.
Yeah.
Visitors discharging their waste directly into the water, even though they are not meant to. They say they don't know. So that's something that we're going to do over the summer. Sort of the ranger team and stuff like that is kind of pass out information so they can't say they don't know. But I know that that's sort of, they've had issues with that in Cawsand last summer.
I know it's high on the agenda for some of the people down here in Falmouth as well, the harbour master and things. I think they kind of know that everyone does it, basically. I don't know if they know how serious a problem it is, but I think it's potentially fairly bad. I suppose, logically speaking, it probably can't be as bad as sewage being produced by a whole town, but I suppose in that latter situation, it's not coming out all the time. But although it is, I mean, treated sewage is being released further out to sea, of course.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those yachts and things, they're in enclosed harbours, aren't they, or far up estuaries. I mean, down at the Penryn River, it definitely is happening down there, because that's, you know, I've done some study down there, and yeah, it's definitely happening down there. But I suppose if they're, you know, more isolated sites, then that it's going to build up over time, whereas, as you say, otherwise, if it's being released further out to sea, then it gives it more of a chance to disperse a bit more before it gets to the rock pools, I suppose. But
yeah, I mean, it's just such an unknown, and so we get some good data on the water itself, and I think even when we start getting data, it's going to be going to need so much data over a long period of time to really sort of try and pin down this kind of thing. But it'd be good to make a start. I see we've got another question there as well from Andy. Hi, Andy. Thanks for joining us. So Andy's located. There he is. Hi, Andy. How are you doing?
Hi.
Located on the north coast near Harland Trevose Head and Bobby's Bay. Is this interesting kind of research carried out closer to you? So we're not currently doing any of this research outside of the areas I've just been talking about in the presentation. Prior to this project, I mean, so the project that we're currently on, the Blue Recovery Project, funded by National Lottery, it is completely focused on those two locations, on those communities, and that's because it's been such a major project for us. That's ended up being our main focus. Prior to that, though, we were looking. We were much more dispersed in our efforts. We have got survey sites across Cornwall, Devon, into Dorset, and in Pembrokeshire. We've even got a survey site up in Scotland that somebody's collected some data for us. So I think that going into the future, we would like to use this as a kind of pilot project and see how we could replicate it elsewhere. I think it's interesting with the citizen science thing. People have different motivations for getting involved, and we've learned over the last year so that being part of a community is a big part of that. And so if we can find a way to sort of replicate the communities that we've developed in Falmouth and Plymouth, albeit maybe on a smaller scale in different locations, and it would be very, very useful to replicate this kind of research elsewhere, because that would really help in not just, I guess, in two ways. First of all, it would allow us to have much more sort of general results, so we can be much more confident in the results that we're finding. But also there will be a lot of interest here from the local communities, just answering questions. I mean, I know down here in Falmouth, the local businesses don't necessarily know whether they should, who use the water, don't really know whether to operate or not if they get an alert for a beach which is nearby. And so to get some information for what's happening in these spills and where they're polluting and for how long, I'm sure that there'd be lots of interest across the country. And I'm sure that a lot of people are already doing this kind of thing. So hopefully, by doing the citizen science forums and getting in touch with other organisations, we can find out what else is going on.
Yes, I think that recently, sort of in retirement, I've been moving down there about 6 months of the year,
Mm-hmm.
and because of that sort of, your area is sort of out of my area somewhat, and I'd prefer to get to work on the beaches that I know.
Yes.
I think it would be very good to join up with other organizations to increase my effectiveness of being able to check, so that what data I do collect is in some way worthwhile adding to somebody else's data. But at the moment, I don't know quite how to or who to link up with.
And I think what I would like to say to yourself and to anybody that joins us on these forums and from other locations is you're very welcome to come and join us, even if it's just for a one-off on one of our monthly beach days, to get a flavour for what we're doing. And it'd be great to chat to you about how we can make it, and when we're putting in funding applications in the future for projects to expand to other areas, how we can do that basically, and what's would need to be done. And like you say, it's probably the easiest way is to work with existing organisations, and so we could chat about that kind of thing. Yeah. Well, I'll keep an eye on what you're doing. You said earlier, what's coming up in the pipeline, so that will be useful for me from that point of view. And I'd also like to say I don't always look like this. I've just had a cataract operation this lunchtime, so that's why I didn't turn my video on straight away. Didn't want to frighten everyone away. Well, thanks very much for joining us straight after that operation. I hope it was a success, and I suppose it's too early to tell, but how's it feel? Well, it's the second one, so I can see, okay. Well, we'll be able to see great in a couple of days' time. Well, thanks very much for joining us. Any other questions or things people would like to say at all? No? Okay. I've always got to give people, always got an awkward pause where people might be unmuting themselves, but they might just be sitting there thinking, wrap it up now. Brilliant. Okay, well, it's been really great to have you all and chat to you all about the project. We'll be in touch soon. I think Samuel should be setting up the Eventbrite for the next one with Dr. John Bothwell later this week. So make sure that you're sort of following the Eventbrite, so you'll get those alerts. We'll email them out as well, and we'll see you in a month's time, hopefully. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.